and good morning, everyone. Welcome to At America. I am Andrea, one of the e-guides here at America, and I hope everyone is staying happy and healthy today. If you're new here, At America is the U.S. Embassy's American Center, and our mission is to provide a space for young Indonesians to learn more about the United States. Our event in this morning is called Intensive Academic Writing Master the Basics with Top Professors. But before we jump into today's event, let me ask a trivia question for today. Our trivia question for today is: what is the oldest citation style that is used in academic writing? Is it A, Chicago, B, APA, C, MLA, or D, IEEE? You can submit your answers through our social media platforms, and if you're able to answer correctly, you will be receiving a live shout out later from us in the end of the event. And now, without further ado, let me introduce you to our facilitator for today. We have Mr. Micah Fisher, Research Fellow from the EastWest Center. For Mr. Micah Fisher, the time is yours.
Hai everyone, selamat siang. Assalamualaikum. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. My name is Micah Fisher. I'm going to be talking a little bit about academic writing. Specifically, I've been asked to discuss issues of argumentation. So allow me to share my screen. Hi, can I get a confirmation that my screen is working?
Yes.
And would you like me to speak in Bahasa Indonesia or in English for the presentation, or both? Okay, both. So I'll give a slight introduction, a little bit about myself and about where I'm coming from, talk a little bit about the EastWest Center, and then I will talk about writing strategies and I will discuss a little bit about approaches, different strategies to conducting good writing practices. And I'd like this to be as interactive as possible. So I've introduced some questions throughout. So it would be great if all participants use the chat function to have an interactive session. Okay, so my name is Micah Fisher. I'm from the EastWest Center. The EastWest Center is in Hawaii. And it is a academic institution. It is a professional development institution. Leadership development engages with East and West. I'll talk a little bit more about that. I also have affiliation with several departments at the University of Hawaii. Also an affiliation with Universitas Hasanuddin, where I teach in the forestry department. And I spearheaded an academic journal called Forest and Society, which is a relatively new initiative, but it's about building a network of capacity building on improving research and academic writing in Southeast Asia. So we've worked a lot across Indonesia, focused a lot on Eastern Indonesia. We've worked in Vietnam and Thailand and other countries in Southeast Asia. So if you're interested in issues around the environment, forests, and society, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. So very quickly, the EastWest Center, I just want to give you a background about it because I think it's a really important institution and hope that people who are interested in pursuing academics in the United States and engaging with issues across the Asia Pacific. Here I put up the mission statement, and I also want to talk about opportunities for scholarship as well. So anybody interested in pursuing academic graduate study, master's degree, PhD. I think it's a great opportunity. Please reach out to us because it's a great place where East and West comes together, focused on the Asia Pacific region, very committed to service-oriented initiatives of community building, and very, very strong academic programs as well. And a huge network across Asia Pacific, which we continue to connect with throughout the region. Okay, let's get right into it. I don't want to get into too long of an introduction. If you have questions about me and the center, please reach out to me. Please check out the different possibilities online. But I want to talk about argumentation by first looking inward, right? Let's think about why we engage in a writing process, because it's very much tied to argumentation. So some basic questions I want you to ask is, what is your writing process like? Because it's different for everybody, right? So the things that we're interested in, the approaches that we want to do in terms of writing is very different from each individual. And think about your challenges. And if you're interested in being a writer or writing for academic purposes and learning how to be convincing, to develop a strong argument, you have to think about what's difficult for you and improve those things that's difficult, but also to really enjoy the process, right? And another question I want you to all be asking yourselves is what is an enjoyable process for you, but also what is your achievement, right? As well as what is your dream writing goal? What is it that motivates you to write? And that is a really important place to start in terms of beginning to better achieve the kind of goals that you want to. Okay, so let's start with a very basic chat question. If you can engage, I want to get a little bit, I don't know who the audience is. I don't see your faces. I feel like I'm just speaking to a screen. So I do want you to answer the question on the left. What's the best piece of writing you've read? And also when you're answering that question, because I'm sure a lot of different options come up into your thinking, what made it so good, right? So the reason that I'm starting this way is because to build a good argument, you have to understand what you think is so compelling. Is it the prose? Is it the narrative? Is it the paradox being raised? Is it the type of questions that you as a writer or as a reader are being promised? These are really important. The other thing is that's really important, and you can Google this. There's an article online called Makers versus Managers. And every student that I have, I always start with this question, or with this article, which is an article about makers versus managers. And to be a good writer, to really develop a strong argument, to really ask a very good research question, it takes time. So what I'm trying to get here is that the types of things that you're able to produce is very much connected to the activities that you engage in, right? So writers are not managers that can go to many meetings and get more productivity out of going to more meetings. What makes good writing is the time to be able to write. So to be a good writer, you need to have, several hours where you're focusing on just the writing processes without many distractions. And preparing that process is really important. Another thing that I encourage everybody to do is, here's just different examples of books about writing, right? So to be a good writer, to get all the strategies, for me to give a presentation here for 30 minutes on one day and then 30 minutes next week, it's very difficult to give the complexity of what it takes to be a good writer. So I encourage everybody to read about good writing, right? So Stephen King, for example, even if you don't want to be that kind of a writer, talks about the craft of writing, or these other titles. There's even books out there about science research writing for non-native speakers, right? So there's lots and lots of resources out there. And I encourage everybody to find time to develop your skills and to get a good, deep understanding about how to do good writing. Another really important lesson that I've found is that writing is a process of analysis, right? A lot of people think writing is just the end product, But if you think about writing, if you think about times where you've gotten stuck in and you're writing and you're doing lots of thinking, right? Especially when you write and then you walk away, you think about it some more, you come back, it moves your thinking along. It is the process of engaging around a question on a specific issue. And by the end of that writing process, you also have become a different person, right? So this is really an important aspect to reflect upon. That when you are writing, you are conducting analysis. So I know you've gotten this already in previous session. There's many different types of academic publications. And this connects to the whole process of reading. Reading is so important in developing good arguments, but you also have to know what your audience is, and you have to know kind of the structures of what type of writing you're doing, right? So for me as an academic writing a research article, there are theoretical driven articles, there are empirical ones that are focused on a data finding, there's methodological ones. And we are seeing also research about research is that there's an increasing emphasis on multidisciplinarity in research because it offers all sorts of new opportunities for discovery. So it's encourages us to reach out, to collaborate, to look at different disciplines, to learn about different ways of doing things. Book reviews are really good. They're also really useful for learning about what the arguments are of a specific piece. So finding the best authors, finding what they've written, beginning with the book reviews, and writing a book review is also, I encourage everybody to engage in this process, right? Read a book. There are tutorials about how to write good book reviews. Look into how to write a good book review and try writing it yourself, right? And there's many other types depending on the discipline, depending on the journal, but there's notes from the field, methodological engagement, editorials, and many different others. Another question I'd like to put here, if you can jump into the chat, which I don't, maybe there's no access to the chat here, but please, I'd like to get a sense of what you're thinking, what motivates you to write. Is it to write a research article for an international journal publication? Is it to write poetry? These things are very, very different in how we approach them, and will help me to guide the discussion today. Okay, let's get into the topic of argumentation then. I just want to briefly reflect on, going to the movies is a really, really great place to learn about argumentation, right? And one that I assume many people have seen is, for example, like The Avengers. And The Avengers is a really, really great example, right? When we think of Thanos, what is Thanos's ideology? What is it that drives him? And this is very, very closely related to philosophy and to different ideologies in academic literature, right? So as a political ecologist, somebody interested in environment and society issues, Thanos really represents this Malthusian idea, right? Where there's not enough land and resources, and so we need less people on the planet. Whereas the other side of that is a complete different philosophical thinking, where perhaps it's not the issue of a division of resources, but it could be, but it rather that it's a distribution of resources problem. So good argumentation are these issues that are compelling, that we can see everywhere all around us, and identifying how those connect is the first step into engaging in compelling processes of argumentation. Thank you for those who have responded. I see that, to finish master's thesis, to write journal publications, PhD proposals. These are really, really important, and gives me a better sense of how to guide the discussion today. And argumentation is really at the core. So I want to begin with some strategies. And I want to say that my background is in social sciences. So a lot of the ways that I engage is particular to that field. So it's very different for different disciplines. And I'm going to give you my perspective on these issues, right? So I want to talk about some strategies or moves. This is a really good resource, a student's guide to reading and writing, and this is from the field of social anthropology. Um, these are obviously different for different disciplines, but I just want to talk about, different clear strategies. And this publication does a really nice job of this. So for example, first, entering a conversation, right? So let's just talk about the current events, right? This is the easiest thing, right? For example, if you open the news today, you'll see that the leaders of the Asia Pacific have convened to establish the Indo-Pacific Economic Forum, right? So entering a conversation could be about a period of time, right? There's something new that's happening here that compels us to ask a new question, right? Great strategy, right? This is something that's happening, something that's developing, and it targets the reader's eye into thinking about, okay, this is important, it's an emerging issue, so let's engage on that topic, right? Very international relations, so very different field than myself, for example, but something that we can clearly engage on. And I think researchers are increasingly aware of the importance of engaging on current events, right? Things that happen in the news. You'll see very, very active discussions, for example, on Twitter about how research is connected to the way that the world is changing. The second example here, strategy, is borrowing and extending, right? So this would be to use a very, very well-known idea and to borrow it to say that, I am aware of this is the way that things have been discussed in the past. And this is very common in Indonesian academics, I see, especially the way that you do your skripsi process, where people are always looking for novelty, right? So establishing that something is happening and then saying, okay, this has happened and now I've found an opening and I want to extend it into a new area. So for example, with the Indo-Pacific Economic Forum example that I gave earlier, it's taking from the way that geopolitical issues between throughout the region have been discussed in the past and now extending that discussion into new areas. The third is establishing authority. And this is something that I encourage Indonesian researchers to do a lot more of, because this is, for example, related to your research site. A lot of researchers who are doing a specific topic that maybe internationally people don't have access to, you can say that you have a specific authority, right? For example, you have been following a policy development, let's say local political elections in West Java for the last 5 years, and you have been attending the different meetings, these different rallies. It shows that you can establish authority over an issue that you know more about because you have been directly involved in that issue. Another strategy is countering, right? So you establish what is the common area of expertise in the literature, and you give it a slight tilt, and you say that I'm going to present a new theory. And then a fifth, I'm not going to go into too many examples here. I want to go quickly so that we can have more of a discussion and the question and answer theories to answer some of the specific issues that you're interested in. So I'm going to try to go quickly through my presentation. The final one is stepping back, right? So kind of describing what's out there in the literature and saying, I'm going to step back and see the entire landscape for what it is, to describe it, usually review articles, employ this strategy. One thing that is really important, and this is a logistic issue that I think is really, really important that I've noticed as an editor at a journal, is that people are often very careless about the first sentence, right? So the first sentence really, really establishes the interest of the reader, right? If the first sentence is bad, somebody reading your article or your writing is not going to want to continue to the second sentence. So what I'm trying to say here is that really, really write a good first sentence and use those moves in the last slide that I mentioned to enter into this conversation in a specific way. So ask a question, raise a paradox, describe something that seems weird, right? And my suggestion is always to try to describe a puzzle, right? Something that we really need to know a lot more about. And in terms of structure, the first sentence is so important, but after the first sentence, the second sentence is also very important. And getting people through the first paragraph where you establish that this is something that's really, really important, and making sure that that then is really, really well discussed on the first page. Because with social media, with so much to read out there, you need to be able to make sure that people are interested in what you're writing. And this may seem like it makes sense, but a lot of the structure of a lot of the writing that I've read, especially in universities in Indonesia, it begins with the beginning of the literature, right? At the beginning, there was this, and it goes on and on through all the different stages of the literature, right? As a literature review. And then on page 5, then it gives you the research question. What I really encourage, good writing and really strong argumentation must be described up front. So within the first paragraph, you describe your paradox. You highlight the different issues that you're interested in. And by the second paragraph, or at least on the first page, you are describing what is it that you are contributing, what it is that your research project is doing, and how you plan to pursue that. Okay, for me, this is the roadmap, right? And this is actually the 7 basic questions that I introduce to people about writing an abstract. And I'll talk a little bit about how this connects to the review process. But let's go through each of these questions. And I say that if you can answer these, 6 or 7 questions in an abstract, then you have a really strong roadmap for approaching your research publication. So the first question is, why does it matter, right? All good research has to establish not just a novelty, which a lot of research institutions say there has to be novelty, right? But it's not just novelty. Sometimes old questions, classic questions are still important. So this issue of kabarua and the novelty isn't necessarily the most important thing, right? It's about engaging on issues that continue to be important. So why does it matter? And really reflecting deeply about that. What is the purpose here? And I put in quotes here, the purpose, methods, the findings and the relevance as different sections of these questions, which map to then the outline of how you create your publication. But this first question about why does it matter is really important. The second really important question is the question, right? The objectives, the aims. And we could do an entire session about what are the aims of how to develop a good research question. But the key is really here, right? What is the question? Making sure that the question is answerable. A lot of times I find research question to be too broad, unanswerable, and it's difficult to see how the methods actually support answering that question. There's a lot of resources online. There's a lot of training about how to write a good research question. It requires reading and deep understanding of what the issues are in the literature. And it requires structuring it in a way that shows that you, as a researcher, are able to answer this important research question. Right. So a lot of journalists always begin with the who, what, where, when, those who, what, where, when, why, all those things. And that's a good place to start. But what makes it research is, engaging on a specific theoretical issue or an empirical problem. And that's where this third question becomes really important. What is the framework, right? How are you approaching this problem that you've provided to us? You've in the question 2 here, you've given us a research question. And so how are you going to approach it, right? What is the framework? Is there a framework? And what does the literature say about, what does research in your field say about approaching this question? The next one, which is also a methodological issue, is data. How did you get your data? And you'd be surprised that this, for me, it tends to be the easiest part to write, right? Because it's so descriptive. Data, this is where I collected it. This is what I did, this is where I got the information to answer the research question. And then question number 5 here then is, how did you do the research? Which is, and these questions, I say that if you answer these 7 questions, you have an abstract. You have the entirety of your argumentation that highlights why it matters, what the question is, what the framework is, how you answered that question, and the relevance of your findings, the results and the overall relevance. So I find this to be a really good resource. It is the template that I use as a reviewer to ensure that a journal publication is worthy of publication. And but this isn't everything, right? So this is just my process, and many researchers and disciplines do it in different ways. But I think all the building blocks are here. So if anything, in terms of your argumentation, in terms of your research and your writing, using these 7 questions as a way to ask questions of yourself, did I complete all these convincingly, is a really nice way to ensure that you're writing a good research article. Okay, so let's then, argumentation begins with the literature, right? It begins with a review of what's out there. It begins with your topic. And I've already mentioned that the research question is pretty much everything, right? It is the starting point. It is what defines everything. So find the research question and focus on answering it. That seems to be really, really straightforward, but it is an art, right? It is very difficult to do this well. And you'll find that the better you are at doing research, you will see very directly that this translates into asking better questions, right? So I always tell students that if you notice that you're beginning to ask better questions, more targeted, more answerable questions, it is an indicator that you are becoming a better academic, I would say. A lot of these research questions, I said, is often too broad and complex, right? And unanswerable. Focus on the puzzle and focus on convincingly answering the question of that puzzle. And here are some key guidelines, A, B, and C, of how to keep these principles in mind. The first is to continue reading. And the resources, I'll show you a couple examples. The resources today are really, really incredible, right? The availability of a Google Scholar, where you can basically read any abstract that you want, and just what you're able to do with different tools on the internet to learn about what research is out there is really remarkable. So I feel like we're living in a really lucky time to be able to access information. The second B here is to go beyond your discipline. I mentioned that stronger research kind of requires new innovations and new opportunities from other research. And the most important is to continue to asking, so what, right? So and then what, right? Why is this important? Why is this question important? Whether theoretically, whether it's empirically, and I hope everybody knows the distinction between those things, right? Okay, please feel free to ask questions. I see that there's questions coming in. How are broad findings could be written in the abstract? We can talk about that. But one thing that I would say right now about that question from Mario Pascal is to say that a lot of early researchers, junior researchers who are just getting started out, tend to try to do too much, right? And journal articles should really focus on one, maybe two key contributions, because it's not a lot of room to really go into kind of depth about an issue. So a journal article should really focus on a strong contribution to the literature. And that's how I would answer this question about how to think about broad findings, situating it into really what you're contributing through the findings of that article. Okay, so a couple of key principles about literature reviews, because this is really the basis of where good argumentation comes from. And I mentioned that there are great resources, whether it's through the library systems or through Google Scholar. But keywords are a really important way to start, right? Because academics really define themselves to a keyword, and those keywords connect to an entire world of literature in and of itself. The next is that I would say it's important to find the best authors, right? Not necessarily what you think is the best, but the people that are being cited the most or that have gained the most attention, because it connects to your legitimacy, right? If you're citing an article that says somebody that's not relatively well known within a obscure journal, that shows that you haven't been able to show that you really understand who is kind of guiding the debate on a particular issue. So it's really important to find the authors that are the most cited around a specific keyword or topic, and to really understand that by citing those people, you are citing an argumentation in and of itself. So what that means is, if you're going to cite somebody who has a certain background, it means that there's other people citing around that. And there's generally a very different way of approaching that, right? So to group these different backgrounds of literature, of research into particular groups is a really, really important exercise to be able to frame an argument. And there's tricks to doing this, and I'll show you a couple. But one thing to do is to find the best research, to find the best researchers. What is the best paper that you've read? And to go to their references section and to really look closely. Look at the journals that they're publishing in. Look at the people who keep coming up, and make sure if there are 5 citations of a specific individual, make sure that you know who those people are, and to cite them to also show that you have an understanding of who those people are. That's really, really important. Looking for time periods as well is really important. So for example, if you are studying climate change, right? 30 years ago, there was very, very few people talking about climate change, right? And to then talk about how this moved into greenhouse gas emissions and climate mitigation and the emergence of climate adaptation. There's time periods of how these debates have shifted from different perspectives. That's really, really important to identify as you describe your research. Another great strategy is to find review papers. So there's people, and you should think about maybe writing a paper that that is a review, and it's a really nice first process. And review papers can get really complex with complex methodologies, but looking for review papers and reading how they group these different fields of research is a really, really nice way to get very quickly to become an expert on an issue by understanding how other experts have described the debates. So be aware that, not all journal articles are created or equal. They are also have very different purposes, and review papers can be really beneficial. Okay. Okay, I'm going to stop share. I'm going to take us to an online free resource that I find really helpful. And if someone could help me in the chat, can you give me your research topic? Give me a keyword. And that will help me to do what I want to do next. International relations issues. Can you be more specific? Ocean acidification. Excellent. Okay, so this is a resource that you can find online that I find very useful for identifying what is in the academic literature. So I clicked here and wrote connected papers. And here I'm going to write ocean acidification. Okay, is this okay? Donnie et al., 2009. Seems like a big paper. The other CO2 problem. Okay, so I put in ocean acidification. I selected perhaps a research article that you may know, and then I put it into here. Oh, I see there's others. Okay, cybersecurity. Okay, we're just going to start with ocean acidification. I put it into connectedpapers.com. I put it in here, and here you can see all the different people that are writing on ocean acidification. You click here on the side, it gives you the different, right? The different abstracts, and it'll also lead you to, the different links, Google Scholar, Joy, et cetera, right? So let's try clicking on Fabry. Okay, let's try a different one. Cybersecurity. If you can be more specific with a specific article, maybe just put it in chat and we'll take a look at that. Here's cybersecurity in the age of COVID-19. Looks like a big article, and it starts to tell you, this algorithm here starts to tell you all the different people, right? And here's this Laley article here at the center, and it begins to group out, okay, much of the cybersecurity debate is happening over here, disentangling community challenges, 6 months, right? So here's a lot of the articles that this person is engaging with, and all these different articles over here. Okay, here's a good one. More international relations. AUKUS trilateral defense treaty. Maybe this is too specific. If it's a brand new issue, AUKUS trilateral defense treaty. If this is too new, maybe there's not articles. Oh, look at this. There's an Indonesian article here, but very few references, right? Because this is an emerging topic. How about this one? Multilateral defense. And, if you're an expert in this topic, you start to see, okay, there's this group over here that is all citing each other, but it's connected to the main article that we searched. And then there's all these people over here. So it's just an example of tools that are available out there that helps you to get familiar with the different literature on a specific topic. Okay? And I'm not here to promote connected papers at all. It's just something that I found useful. There's many other resources like this, some that are much more sophisticated. But this is just a basic one that you can enter into to find what are the different keywords, what are the different articles that are related. And what I really want to show you that's happening in the algorithm there is to show you that if you're rating a research paper, if you are establishing an argument, you want to make sure that the way that those groups come together, those are the ones that are in conversation with one another, right? So describing who this group is over here, what the research questions that they've been engaged in, how that's changed over time, versus another section is really, really important. Besides Connected Paper, do you have any recommended site for online international journals? Yeah, so there's different indexing processes, and it's up to you to look for them. But the Schemago system, you can look and see what the international journals are. You can start to study what's in your field. I can show you that very quickly because I think we have time here. And I assume that most of you know how this works already, but let me just show you how to find a journal, right? So I'm going to put the journal that I'm an editor on, Forest and Society here. I'm going to push enter. And this is connected to Elsevier, right? Forest and Society, we're very new, 4 years old. You can see that it's related to forestry, geography, planning and development, nature and landscape conservation. So in those fields, it's rated as a Q2 in 2019. We went up in forestry and planning up to Q1. We're at Q2 now in 2021, and it shows you that those are the kind of journals. That's the rating of the journal. It has other ways of doing the rating system as well. You can see here all the metrics in the Elsevier system, and then you can also see similar journals, right? So finding an international journal that's related, you can see these are the similar other international journals and the percentage of similarity to doing that. So I just thank you for asking that question. I want to make sure that I'm giving you resources that are useful for you. And that's a good question. And there's other places to look as well. Okay, I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint. I know that I've been talking for about 35 minutes, which is what I had planned to do. We did a little activity, but let me just get back to it. Where am I? Okay. Okay, just confirming you can see my screen. I was on Connected Papers here. Okay. If I want a little bit more participation here. Give me what your research questions are. Can you share with me what if you're doing a dissertation proposal for your PhD, if you're doing a master's thesis, share a little bit if you're comfortable. You don't have to, but tell us a little bit about generally what is your research question. Drop it in the chat. It'll help me be able to better engage with you. So I want to just flip it around, right? I hope maybe some of you have not submitted an article for a journal publication, but I've done many, many reviews for different journals. And I just wanted to show you what the process looks like from the reviewer, because understanding how a reviewer of a journal examines your paper is really helpful in trying to make sure that you are convincing in what you do, right? So generally, articles are structured like this. It's not always like this: introduction, methodology, results, discussion, conclusion, right? But in most journals, to be successful, you kind of have to have these components. It doesn't necessarily have to follow this. Sometimes there's a literature review section, but overall, this is what it looks like. So here is what I do. When I read a paper, I read it once, and then I ask myself these questions, right? And I tend to give feedback per section, right, of the paper writing. And so I always start with this question, right? Was this paper, is it a good question, and was it convincingly presented, right? What were the methods? Were those convincingly presented and executed? What were the results, and did they reflect the methods? Did this discussion recontextualize in the context of the original question? And, was the title good? Was it well written? Was it a contribution that fits with the journal publication that I'm reviewing for? So, you just want to humanize the other side of the process. Reviewers are people who tend to be experts in a specific field that are generally have the same background as the journal that you're submitting your paper to. So in that case, it's important to then try to think like a reviewer before you submit a paper. And here's my last slide then. In sum, okay? So just key reflections about writing, right? And this is adapted from an article from 10 Tips on How to Write Less Badly. It's published as an academic publication, but I've added several more. So first is writing is an exercise, right? So, the proverb of if you want to run far, well, then practice running, right? If you want to write well, you need to practice writing. And I spent a lot of time at the beginning of my presentation really trying to convince you all that it is important to have a lot of time dedicated to producing a writing project, right? And you need to set goals, right? If it's difficult at first, start with minutes, build up to hours, or target numbers of pages, or finishing one paragraph every single day. Take the necessarily take breaks, right? You can't do it all at once. And just see what happens over time. And you'll, very quickly realize that it builds up and you start to look at these things at different angles. Find a voice. It's, a lot of people want to get published in international journals, but it's not just about getting published, right? It's about having a contribution. It's about finding your voice based on your background and your motivations. And the narrative that you build over time will make your writing that much better and that much more convincing. Give yourself time. Writing cannot be what is it? SKS, right? System kabut semalam. It can't be that. It has to be. If it's a complex problem, you need to think deeply about it. It needs to develop over time. You need to look at it at all these different angles to make sure that you've covered all the different holes that a reviewer might point out, for example. I mentioned the puzzle. Think about what you're doing, what you're writing, what you're exploring, what you're trying to answer as a puzzle. And think about how to really creatively answer that puzzle in new sort of creative ways. Start small, see how far you get. This number 7 here, as a graduate student, for example, you have this profound, you think this is this profound issue, you're going to do it, you're going to solve it, you're going to find the answers to it. And my experience personally, and a lot of my colleagues, we go in with a research question, an assumption, and then you get to the field, you begin to research it, and you realize that your assumptions about that were completely wrong or very different from the reality of what you found. And that's not a bad thing. That is a good thing because you are starting to be able to explore your findings and to be able to present an issue in new sorts of ways. And then I'll end with edit, 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 which is the topic of next week, where we'll be talking about editing. So in conclusion, then, I just want to say that today has been about talking about argumentation. And you all come from such diverse backgrounds, right? It's so interesting, the different types of biology of Stenocranis pacifica, cybersecurity, ocean acidification, security studies, international relations, biology, et cetera, et cetera. And I wanted to keep it broad, but give you principles of different ways to approach these challenging issues, right? From the personal, really, to think about who you are, what your role is in doing research, what your strengths are, understanding who has been the most influential to your own research, and also to begin approaching your research in your own unique, creative ways. And hopefully I've been able to give you some tools for doing that, and hopefully some principles, some guiding principles, the 7 questions of an abstract that I proposed to you all, about making sure that the argument fits together, right? That the problem that you're raising or the paradox that you are engaging on, the different ways of engaging on an issue, that you're able to establish a methodological approach that's convincing, and you're able to pursue that to really, really make a contribution. I think that there's so much opportunity here. A lot of people, a lot of international researchers often ask why Indonesians aren't writing more. And I really think that writing is power, right? So you by being able to get published and having your name on the record as being an expert on an issue really establish you as being able to shape how people think about these issues. So I encourage you all to think about your strategies, your motivations, and the creative ways of doing argumentation and the strengths that you all have to doing that. So thank you very much for the time. I look forward to having a more detailed discussion with you all. Thanks.
Okay, Sir Micah, we have several questions uh, from our social media platforms. First of all, we have a question that is asked by 4 people, by Kinara from Twitter, Aninda, Giri, and Johan from Instagram, which is how to improve our vocabulary, and how can I improve in my argumentative writing skills?
Vocabulary is interesting, right? I would say that, especially in academic writing, it's really not an English problem. A lot of Indonesian researchers that I speak to often say that, well, I'm not a native speaker. And to be honest, a lot of native speakers have a bigger problem than non-native speakers. So what I really want to emphasize here is that think of being a non-native speaker as a strength, because a lot of times non-native speakers are much more clear about what they want to say. And this often in an academic setting is a strength, right? Um, a lot of native speakers tend to write long sentences, that go in many different directions. But for non-native speakers, you have to be very deliberate about what you're saying, right? So make sure that in terms of vocabulary, in terms of structure of writing, make sure that you're very clear in what you're saying and that one sentence builds upon the next sentence. But in terms of vocabulary in academic writing, the jargon is very specific to the field, right? So it's really not about improving your vocabulary in English. It's about improving your vocabulary around that research topic. So the more you read in the journals that you want to publish in, if you're interested in publishing academically, the more you will begin to notice what are the key ways of phrasing something, right? If I'm going to write an article, for example, on cybersecurity, my English is not going to be better than, say, Finadwi Rahmadiningsi, right? She is going to have a better understanding of the vocabulary in cybersecurity because she's the one promoting that issue and really knows a lot more about it. So strengthening vocabulary is about not just reading, but reading in a very strategic way in the other people that'll be reading your kinds of writing, right? So the audience is really key here.
Okay, so move on to the next question. We have question from Gabby from Instagram. Can I cite an article or journal into an academic writing? How to avoid plagiarism?
So I did not cover, I always cover plagiarism. It is very, very important to me. And what I want to say about plagiarism is never, ever, 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 ever plagiarize, right? Because what plagiarizing is it's stealing. Um, and the most important and the most sacred part, why plagiarism is looked down upon so much as the greatest sin in academic writing, is because it's stealing another person's ideas, which is the core of what is trying to be produced in an academic context, right? In a research context. So that's why, if you understand why plagiarism is so important, that's really the philosophy behind it. Why is it important not to plagiarize? Because you don't want to steal from other people, right? And I know in a lot of contexts, especially educational contexts, that you think that the right answer is out there, and so that the best way of saying it is the way that it's already being said. So I understand the reasons why people have such a natural tendency to want to plagiarize, but um, but don't do it. And what you'll see is that the way that you should approach it is always being able to say it into your own words. So last week's presentation, I know from this speaker series, spent a lot of time talking about plagiarism. So I specifically did not discuss plagiarism today, but I think the one principle to take away from the issue of plagiarism is, once you read something, look away and try to explain it again, um, in your own words, right? In your own way. And what that does, and it's hard at the beginning, but what that does is it forces you to be able to really understand what you're reading, right? And the more you practice it, read something, go away, don't look at it again, and then write it in your own way. And by doing that, what you'll see over time is that you will become much better at understanding the issues and being able to describe the topic that you're referencing. And that's the best way to avoid plagiarism in my mind.
Okay, next question. This question is asked by Nina from Facebook and Anton from Twitter. What is an argument in academic writing? And is it necessary to provide an argument in every piece of academic writing?
Yeah, I would say that the argument, I mean, the question about what is argumentation, the session today was about argumentation. So I want to make sure that I very, that I correctly convey what argumentation is, right? And it's really positioning in research, right? So understanding an issue, creating your position about it. It's looking at the different ways that other people have described it, and really entering into a conversation, being able to create, for example, a research question that you can convincingly then articulate and then execute going forward. And it is a really, really important skill. And the reason that I focus today so much on personal strategies is that it's so much more than just saying that argumentation is being able to do A, B, and C. But it's about training yourself to be able to continue to understand the issues, to continue to deepen your understanding about the issues in a way that helps you to ask better questions, and then to position out why your approach to understanding this issue is important, right? It is really the core of what is important. It is the core of everything in academic issues, in an academic setting, right? So the way that you argue your issue, depending on what field you are, some people call it, the hypothesis testing. Some people call it, it depends, right? Whether it's philosophy or social science or humanities, the argument is really at the core of what is driving research.
Okay, next question from Bima from YouTube. Can you share some tips to make academic writing interesting?
So that's a great question. That's a really, really great question, because what that means is that academics have done a really bad job of making their writing interesting. What I would say is that to be a good academic article, what it needs to be is more interesting. And I think that this is a question that's been going on a lot in academic settings about, you know, how do we make it more interesting? How do we make it more relevant? In recent years, there's been a lot of discussions around kind of the co-production of knowledge, working together to do these things, the advent of social media, how to communicate our research, how to make it meaningful. And it's just, I think that a lot of academics can learn, for example, from journalists, from movies, from theater, from ways of setting up, stories. I think academics need to be better storytellers, and that your question is a really good one, right? How can how can we make academic writing more interesting? Well, we need to work a lot harder at it, right? And what that means is we need to make it more relevant to the communities that we're engaging with. And that doesn't mean that an academic article needs to be relevant to lots of people. But even if it's a targeted audience of, 5 of the top researchers in the specific topic, even then, the way of entering into that writing process, we all need to be pay more attention to, and to do that. So I gave some strategies for doing that, right? And I think to make it more interesting is really to focus on the puzzle, to really focus on a paradox, a current event issue, to make it matter. And you saw throughout my presentation, me trying to describe this question, so what, right? Continuing to ask, so what? Why does it matter? Is really an important question that we can continue to ask ourselves to make research more interesting to a broader or more targeted readership.
Okay, next question from Miranto Dwi Nugroho from Zoom. If our writing is reviewed by more than one person, how do we update the writing? Is it by combining both reviews?
Yeah, that's a really good process question. And what I would say to that question is that the final decision is with the editor, right? So there's a lot of reviewers. You'll get two or three reviewers, and sometimes those reviewers disagree on an issue, right? So how do you then address that, right? If two reviewers say opposing things, if they say different things, then what you need to do is really think about how your argument fits into the overall journal and what the editor's comments on that are, right? And if there are competing arguments by the reviewers, I think, what you should do is make your case, right? You can take a side. You can say this reviewer said this reviewer said this, and because of my research and because of what we've done on our research, then this is what I am going to do in terms of addressing those reviewer comments. If you are very conflicted about the issue, it's okay to email the editors and say, this is very difficult for me. But ultimately, the reviewers don't have any authority over accepting a journal article, right? The reviewers are invited. Sometimes editors will read what a reviewer says and won't like the reviewers and may send it out for additional reviews or a different opinion about or a different expertise about an issue. So there's many ways to strategically address competing reviewer comments. And the way that you address that is to be really convincing, rooted in the methodology, in the way that you approach how you did your research, and to really take seriously what the reviewers say in how you conduct your revisions.
Okay, next question from Fina on Zoom. Besides Connected Paper, do you have any recommendation site for online international journal?
Yeah, I answered that question earlier while I was presenting. I even opened up the Schemago site to show where you can access, and that's only one example. There's others as well.
Okay, so to the next question from Amy on Zoom. If I'm not mistaken, you're a journal reviewer. So which journal part do you concern on reviewing?
Can you say that again? I didn't understand.
As a journal reviewer, which journal part do you concern on reviewing?
Um,
Maybe
I
like
don't.
which
What do you
part of
mean?
journal that you usually spot some mistakes, maybe?
Oh, um, okay. Uh, I think that relates directly to the discussion today. Which is about the argumentation. Usually the research, it's almost always it relates to the research question and the extent, the research objectives and the extent to which those research questions were answered convincingly, right? So there's a research question. The methods may not have been adequate to answering the research question, or the results did not reflect the methodology or the research question. It's really what makes a good research article, and what is very difficult to do is being able to connect from the research question through the methods, through the results, right? And then making sure that that process then comes together in a discussion section that connects to the overall literature, what other people have been researching on this topic. So when you describe it that way, it sounds really simple, but actually doing it requires very close attention towards. I'm not saying it's difficult. Anybody can do research, right? Anybody can do this. It is a process. You can just approach it in a specific way. You continue to read. You continue to contextualize. You can apply the right kind of methodologies, and then the results to contextualize the results. But it's really in the connection of all of those parts where a lot of publications fall apart, right? So it's not. I mean, I would say it's about the overall argument, but I would say also that it falls apart, making sure that it connects from one section to the next. And that's why I focus so much tonight on your writing process, where you need the time to step away and reflect. But you also need to come to the computer or to your writing pad to make sure that you're continuing to write so that you don't forget about these issues. So it's not just thought of at the last minute. That's my answer.
Okay, next question from Melinda on Zoom. About the principle, go beyond your discipline. How far researchers can go beyond their discipline? Or is it better to collaborate with other researchers from different fields?
Um, my initial reaction to that is that you should focus on the research question, right? Why it's so beneficial to collaborate with other disciplines is because it helps you to structure better research questions and to develop better research methods. So, for example, if I am interested in land use change in South Sulawesi, right? And which is what my research was about. So studying how these land changes occurred in a place like South Sulawesi. Let's say then I began talking to a researcher who is a a very skilled mapper, right? That knows how to look at remote sensing and satellite imagery. And then what if there's somebody who was working on big data, looking at how Twitter discussions around this issue were being shaped? So these are examples where I have in the past reached out to other researchers to help me in terms of the methods to develop better research methods to develop to identify new types of data that can improve the broader relevance of a research question. But it also adds strength to the implications of your findings, right? So that's what I mean about multidisciplinarity or interdisciplinarity, where by discussing and combining ideas with other types of researchers, that allows you to take on more complex questions and to do better research.
Okay, on to the last question for today from Badri from Zoom. Writing articles is something new for me. Do you think it is rational for beginners to submit their articles to Synta index journals, or we would be better start with non-index ones like ISS and only?
What I would say is that you should always aim high. Um, so my suggestion is that you should aim for a journal that's better than that you anticipate, right? So if you think that yours is a Synta journal level this, I would say go even higher. You'll go one step higher, especially if you have time. Because if you submit your article there, you'll get better reviewers, right? You will get people who have more experience, and even if you end up getting rejected, the opportunity to get experts that are at a higher level to give you comments is really helpful. But I would say that uh, it's not about just getting published, right? It's about, especially for junior and younger researchers that don't have the experience, it's about improving your skills. It's about becoming a better writer, asking better questions. So, what I would say is that you should reach out to somebody to help review your paper and to give you ideas about what to do before you submit it, right? And then once you think you have a really good product, a good research publication article, then you should aim a little bit higher than what you anticipate because you might be surprised. Um, so that's what I would do. I would not I don't know what kind of the points system are in Indonesia. So I don't know the incentive structures that you all are dealing with. And I'm sure it's different, right? What is an ISSN only, or what is a Cinta, or what is an international journal going to give you? Um, those have different point categories, and some of it you need to get a publication quickly because of your promotion or because of your requirements to graduate with a degree. So I know that there's a lot of considerations there, but if you have the opportunity, the time, I would aim higher and I would try to, you'd be surprised because a lot of journals are looking for submissions, right? They're always looking for good submissions. So if you think you have something that is good, make sure you read the other journals in those publications that you're targeting. Make sure you cite those articles from that journal publication is really important. And hope for the best.
Okay, so before I close today's event, do you have anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate the fact that writing is so important, and the accessibility of writing, you really have the opportunity to influence a lot. A lot of people say that people don't read academic articles, but I tend to disagree with that because of the access of Google Scholar. If you're writing on a topic that not people know about geographically, or an issue that is about a place that people haven't been, I really encourage that if you have specific data sets about a place, to really get that into the academic literature, because a lot of scholars from all over the world are looking for information about places, about different unique characteristics, especially if you're in the field of the environment in Indonesia. It's really hard to get data about a place. And a lot of Indonesian researchers from these especially regional universities, have really unique opportunities to access data and information. So don't underestimate the power and possibility of your writing. And like I said it to the final question earlier, is you should aim high. You should believe in your writing, and you will know, if you did the work to read the literature, to really understand what's going on, and you're confident that the methods were adequate to answering a research question, and that your findings are really relevant, then submit it. And hopefully that you'll get good reviews, and hopefully that the reviewers will then help you to even write better, a better final product. But I would say that I really encourage everybody to work at their writing. I really think that there's a huge opportunity for Indonesian researchers, and I wish everybody the best. Please feel free to reach out to me. If you are working on issues of forest and society, make sure you look at forest and society. We do a lot of writing workshops to develop capacity, and we've worked with a lot of universities to be able to improve research, and we will continue doing so. So if you have ideas, please let us know, and we really want to be supportive. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone, for your participation today. I hope that you gain a lot of knowledge and insights from today's session. I would also like to thank our facilitator today for sharing your knowledge with us. And earlier in this event, we asked our audience a trivia question. And the question was, what is the oldest citation style that is used in academic writing? And the answer is A, Chicago. Shout out goes to at Iran Todwi from Instagram for answering the question correctly. And thank you for everyone else who has participated in our trivia question. Now you may be wondering, how can I contribute an amazing event at America? It is very simple. All you have to do is go to our website at www.atamerica.or.id, go to create an event, and click collaborate with us. All event proposals will be reviewed, and your event might be featured with us soon. Also, please do not forget to follow our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all at AT America, for event updates and fun contents. And also, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and newsletter so you will be getting more updates from us. Okay, with that, I think it is time to say goodbye. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming. And my name is Andrea. See you at the next At America event. Thank you.